church today. It's raining. Did you know Christians melt in the rain on Sunday? You get extra points for that. I'm just kidding. So on Thursday, we have church on Thursday. Did you know that? We have church on Thursday. It's like the same as this. A little different, but it's the same. It's not like a different service. It's the same service, just a little different flavor of the same service on Thursday. So if you ever can't come on Sunday, you can come on Thursday. You should come on Thursday. It kind of takes I'm sorry. So here's the joke. It's all connected. I walked up to somebody on Thursday, and we were talking about how many kids were in the nursery. It was like, the one week there was like 17, and then the next week there was 9. And I don't know if you know, pastors are like, Ugh. So I was making a joke with one of the workers, and she goes, I said, I'm sorry, that was passive aggressive. And she goes, no, it was pastor aggressive. So I am pastor aggressive sometimes. But anyways, you should come on Thursday if you can't come on Sunday, and then you don't have an excuse besides the rain. It doesn't rain inside. It used to rain inside. We used to have holes in the roof, and like actually right over here was the rain section. But we've got that fixed, so you're good now. So, all right, hey, let's jump in. I want you to imagine with me going back in time and signing up to be a soldier in the Civil War for a moment. Okay, so we're gonna travel back in time 160 years, and you're gonna sign up to be a soldier. You're gonna be issued a blue coat because you're signing up for the Union because you're in Ohio. So good for you. You're on the right side of history there. And they're going to give you a uniform that has way too many layers and buttons, and it doesn't make any sense, but everything they did back then was overly formal. So even in battle, you're going to have buttons and all that stuff. So you're going to look all nice. They're going to issue a muzzle-loaded Springfield rifle and about 40 to 50 rounds of ammunition called a Manet ball, which is weird because it's actually not a ball. This musician actually kind of looks like a modern day bullet, even though it wasn't. It was a newer technology at the time, accurate 400 to 500 yards, if you are. So hopefully you are signing up for this war. They'd also issue you a pack with like rations, a blanket, a canteen, and half of a tent. You'd get half of a tent, not a whole tent, because you're gonna combine your tent with another soldier's half of a tent, and you guys are going to make a whole tent together. But I do want to give some context to that, so do keep in mind there were no toilets, and toilet paper had just been invented, but it was not available for commercial use yet. And deodorant didn't exist, and there weren't showers. So maybe you just go with the half a tent. Maybe you just keep the one side open. I don't know about you. That's what I would prefer. You'd also be marching to wherever you went because there were no planes or trucks to take you there. You'd be marching. And then once you get to the battle, as I'm sure you can imagine if you've seen any kind of war movies, it's just chaotic. Just noise and blast going off, concussion blasts going off everywhere. Communication was difficult. They didn't have, radios or any of that kind of stuff. So they would do like trumpet blasts and like flags to kind of tell you where you're supposed to go. So it'd just be, you're shooting, and hopefully you're shooting at the guys wearing the gray coats. Hopefully, that's what you're hoping for. And let's say in the midst of a battle, you get shot. And it's not in the head. You wouldn't know anything about that. You'd be gone. And it's not, let's say it's not in the chest or like a gut shot. Let's say you just get shot in the arm. And you might be like, oh, good. Just a flesh wound. And let's say you crawl back from the front lines and you make your way to the medical tent because you're like, hey, this is where I'm going to get help. And you open up the flaps of the medical tent, hopeful, but you are, as soon as you walk in, about to be very, very disappointed. Because here's the crazy thing during the Civil War. You were actually more likely to die from infection and disease than you were a bullet in the Civil War. Isn't that nuts? The moment you entered that war, statistically speaking, you were more likely to die from dysentery or sepsis or gangrene than you were a bullet. And the reason is because back then, they didn't know that germs existed. And it's hard to believe, but it was just on the cusp, just on the other side of the war, they start to discover some things. But they didn't know germs existed. They didn't know about bacteria and viruses. So like you're walking in there with this wound on your arm, they're not gonna clean it. Why? They don't have a reason to clean it. They don't have any kind of antiseptic, any kind of disinfectant that they're gonna put on it. Disinfect from what? They didn't know germs exist. So you are more likely to die from the infection than you were the bullet. So their solution, and you can't blame them because they didn't know, their solution was to amputate. They amputated so many limbs during this war because it was kind of a trial and error thing. They realized that if they amputated, people were less likely to die from infection. They weren't making the connection yet, but so the moment you entered that medical tent, there was a 75% chance you were going to lose that arm because 3 out of 4 operations during the Civil War were amputations. And some historians, even though they didn't keep great medical records, estimate 10 to 20% of Civil War veterans lost some part of some limb. All right, so that's depressing. Let me tell a joke instead. It's related, I promise. So as a dad, I have 4 kids, 2 older ones, 2 younger ones right now. So the older in middle school and high school, and then I have 2 younger ones, a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. And sometimes the younger ones will come to me with invisible boo-boos. Anybody have this? Your kids just walk up. Like, I swear Band-Aid, half of Band-Aid sales have to be from invisible, non-existent boo-boos because I need a Band-Aid. I'm like, no, you don't. So I have a strategy. They'll come up with this boo-boo, and I'm like, oh, okay, let me see it. And I'll like look real close. I'm like, ooh. This is really bad. I'm sorry. We're going to have to amputate. Go get the scissors. And they will just run away screaming at that point. So I don't have to get up and get a Band-Aid. Isn't that horrible? My kids will need therapy later, but that's not going to be my problem. Does anybody do that? You definitely should make the amputation joke. That's like the ultimate dad joke. You have to make that joke. It's good. Anyways, the Civil War. So I told you, trying to make it not as sad. They didn't know about bacteria, though. What a huge thing. So that means a small, untreated wound could be deadly. And it wasn't the initial wound. That's the thing I want you to think about. It wasn't the initial wound. It was the infection that came from the initial wound that would be deadly. So 2 things. 1, aren't you glad you live in 2024 where penicillin exists and we understand these things? 2, this leads into our series today. So we're in a series called Cliché, where we're looking at a partial truth as a whole problem. We're looking at common cliches that people say today. And the reason we're doing this is because people in our culture have taken these cliches and kind of made them into principles that they live by. They've elevated these cliches to like Bible level in their life, and they're trusting in them. And while some of these cliches have like some truth in them, there are some subtle, insidious lies built into them that if you continue to trust in these things, they can cause a massive damage in your life. So the cliche we're looking at today, in light of what I just told you about the Civil War, is a little laughable, but it's still incredibly popular. The cliche is, time heals all wounds. Time heals all wounds. Hundreds of thousands of Civil War soldiers would beg to differ. This cliche is obviously an exaggeration, right? Obviously an exaggeration, but it's still widely prevalent. People say this all the time, right? Now, we don't use it much for physical wounds anymore, right? You don't say that much for a physical wound. You say it to those relational wounds that we get, right? When someone hurts someone else in a relational way, that's the most popular place that this gets said, right? Somebody's going through a breakup with their boyfriend, they're crying into their pillow, and you're trying to catch them between sobs, and you're like, hey, just be patient. Time heals all wounds, right? You're trying to they're there, patting them. Or somebody's having like a big family squabble and everybody's mad at everybody, and you're, hey, just give it some time because, time heals all wounds. Or maybe you've had, maybe it's happened to you where you've had somebody say something or do something to you and it's a deep wound, like cuts you to the core. And a good, well-meaning friend says some version of, well, you just need to give it some time because time heals all wounds. You hear it said in those situations all the time. But you know what's weird? You probably wouldn't use it on the other side, the physical side, right? If somebody got shot and you're there comforting them, you're probably not going to say, hey, guess what, though? Good news. Time heals all wounds. Just wait it out, buddy, right? Or if they get bit by a pit viper, you're like, oh, yeah, time heals all wounds. The foaming at the mouth is probably normal. You're good, right? Or if somebody gets severely burned, you're probably not given this advice. Time heals all wounds. Isn't it weird that we understand on the physical side that there are some things that time will not heal, but we tend to kind of ignore it when it comes to the relational, emotional side of our life? We still want to believe that only time is required. Now, it is a tempting thing to say. It is. It's a cliche for a reason. And I think part of the reason it's a tempting thing to say is because when you're in pain, you need to know that the pain's not gonna last forever, right? That is a comforting thing. Please tell me that my current state is not my forever state. I can't live like this forever. So there's a sense in which this is supposed to be comforting to you that, hey, I'm not always gonna be in this pain. Time will heal the I'm not gonna feel this forever. The pain will dull and then fade. Good. And the other reason I think it's tempting to say is because time is necessary for healing, right? You're not Wolverine. You don't have healing powers so you can just pop bullets out of yourself, right? You're not that. So we understand that time is a part of the process. Time is a necessary ingredient in healing. Where the cliche goes wrong is that time is not the only ingredient. A lot of wounds aren't healed by time alone. So I would say if we look at time is a neutral participant when it comes to your wound. Time can give wounds space to heal, but time could also give wounds space to get infected, space to get really bad, space to fester. So let's not make the same mistake that Civil War doctors were making and pretend like there's nothing else going on, that we just need to wait. Time is neutral. So, I want to suggest something to you today. You have some kind of relational pain in your soul. If you've been alive for any amount of time at all, you have, we could say, relational bullet holes in your soul. You've been shot. Some people in your life have really hurt you. And when I say that, some of you immediately know who I'm talking about. Oh, yep, my ex. Yep, hurt. Still hurts, right? Or maybe for you, maybe it's a parent. You go back and you're like, man, they just messed me up. It's messed me up. Or maybe it's a former friend or a former mentor. You've got somebody who used to be close to you, used to be good for you, and something happened, some kind of falling out, and now you've got some deep, deep soul wounds from these relationships. So how are you doing? Are you hoping? Are you maybe not even aware, but are you hoping in this cliche, well, time will heal all wounds? Are you hoping that just eventually it'll just go away? Eventually it'll stop hurting. Eventually it'll stop bleeding. Eventually I'll just be better. Are you hoping in this? Because I want to tell you, I don't think it's just going to get better on its own. Remember the movie, the Monty Python movie, where the Black Knight is guarding is it a bridge or something, and he gets his arm lopped off, and he goes, "'Tis but a scratch," right? And the guy's like, "Your arm's on the ground." He's like, "No, it's not." Could that be you when it comes to your relational wounds? Are you trying to tell yourself that this is going to get better? Are you trying to tell yourself that it's not as bad as it really is? Could you be actually really hurting right now? And actually, the longer you wait, it might not get better. See, because here's the problem. You know what time turns emotional pain into? Anger. It turns into anger. It doesn't just heal. You get mad. And then if enough time passes, we start to call that bitter. That's what bitterness is. It's just long-term anger over a wound you received. Bitterness. So I want you to kind of think of bitterness like an infection in a wound. I think this is a good mental image for us. If bitterness is an infection, not only will it prevent it from healing, it could cause more pain and more damage than just the initial wound ever caused. Let me show you a verse in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15. Watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you, corrupting many. Now there's a ton, just in that one little sentence, a ton of truth jammed into there. So look what it says. It says bitterness is poisonous. It says that it grows. It says that it troubles you and that it can corrupt others. That's crazy. So I want this imagery to stick in your mind. Next time you start to feel bitter, I want you to associate that with being poisoned. Can you imagine being poisoned? Like there's almost a panic involved in that. Like I gotta get this, whatever's poisoning me, I gotta get it out of me, right? I gotta get some kind of antidote. I don't wanna be poisoned, right? I want you to have that same kind of a feel when you allow yourself to get bitter, like, this is bad, this is toxic to me. And then it also says that it grows. Well, that means it's not gonna go away on its own. Your bitterness is not gonna shrink on its own if you just like, I'll just ignore it. Time will heal, Liz. No, this says your bitterness is going to get worse, not better, on its own. And then it said that it troubles you. Well, you kind of knew that already, right? Being bitter isn't like a super fun feeling to have. But interestingly enough, the Greek word here used for trouble is the same word in other places in the Bible used to describe what demons do to people. Troubles you, torments you. So bitterness, it almost described as like an active thing. Like it's not passive. It can get inside your veins a little bit and it starts to work on you. And then the last thing that it said is that it corrupts many. Now this is different from a physical wound, right? If you get a physical wound, it's all about your own pain. But this says that your infection of bitterness can spread. That you can hurt other people with your bitterness. And that's different, right? Because I know maybe if you're like me, like if I hurt myself, I'm like, it's my problem. I got this. And if I want to hurt myself, I can hurt myself. But with bitterness, this says, hey, if you're allowing yourself to have bitterness, and it's certainly hurting you, it also is going to hurt the people around you. Bitter you is not the best you. You think about that? Bitter you is not the best you. Now, you kind of understand this in other areas of your life. Let me say this. Here, you'll resonate with this sentence. Hungry you is not the best you. Anybody? Yeah. You just elbow your spouse right now. Hungry you is not the best you, right? Now, the weird part about that one, and this is what I want to make an observation about you when you're hungry. When you're hungry, you're more easily annoyed, right? You have a little shorter patience with people. You're a little sharper in your interactions sometimes. But here's the weird part. You hardly recognize why in the moment. When it's happening, you're just like, no, you're more annoying right now, right? The kids are just a little bit more in your face, right? It feels like circumstances are worse. And then you eat something and you're like, oh, it was me. I'm sorry for what I said when I was hungry, right? You have to go back. But you didn't recognize it when you were in it. It wasn't until it was gone that you look back and said, oh, it wasn't them, it was the hunger. What if bitterness works the same way? What if you allow yourself to get bitter and you don't even realize it, but some of your interactions are very, very tainted by that. And some of the way you perceive people is tainted by that. And it wouldn't be until after you got rid of your bitterness for you to look back and go, oh, that was me. What if that's true? Because this is way different than hungry, right? Hunger you solve in a meal. Bitterness, you can carry that for years. Bitter you not being the best you could last for the rest of your life. And you will live that entire time beneath what God wants for you. And everyone else in your life will get a lesser you, because bitter you is not the best you. So what's the solution? I'm hoping at this point you're like, man, I really don't want to be bitter. That was what I'm hoping for right now, in case you were wondering, as I was preparing the sermon. I'm like, right now I'm hoping they're not wanting to be bitter. Hopefully you want a solution. So let's look at Ephesians chapter 4. We'll start in verse 31. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. So this verse really describes the person you don't want to be, right? Nobody reads this verse and like, man, that's what I want for me. Like, I want to be bitter. I want to be rage-filled. I want to be angry. I want to be like the harsh word and slander person. Like, nobody wants that, right? You read this is the list of the person you don't want to be. So it says, get rid of it. And notice he doesn't say just get rid of it. He said get rid of all of it. All of it. Because if any little piece is left, just like an infection, it can grow. So you don't want to leave any bitterness anywhere in here at all. You want to get rid of all of it. All of it. Okay, cool. So how? Verse 32. Instead, be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you. Kind, tenderhearted, forgiving. So the solution to your bitterness is forgiveness. The solution to your bitterness is forgiveness. I know that almost sounds like an oversimplification, but you really only have two choices. So you all of your relationships in your life, every single one, those people in the relationship, they're going to hurt you at some point. You know, the only person who's not going to hurt you is Jesus, right? You don't got any of those sitting next to you right now, right? There's no Jesus in here. You got a bunch of humans. And every single relationship, you're going to receive some kind of wound from a person. And what this is telling us is you really only have two options with those wounds that you're going to receive. You can choose to get bitter, or you can choose to forgive. And that's it. That's all you got. And you're like, well, I'm going to choose a third. What third option? There is no third option. You either forgive them, or you're going to turn bitter. And there's all different levels, right? The bigger the thing, the bigger the bitterness. But this is why, and I actually think it's cumulative too. There's some relationships that last a really long time, and nobody ever did anything really bad, but over time, a bunch of little stuff accumulated into a whole lot of bitterness. And the relationship isn't healthy because they're not choosing forgiveness. Therefore, automatically, they're carrying around years' worth of bitterness. So forgiveness, if we continue with the imagery, is the disinfecting antiseptic balm on your wound that will clean it and allow time to do its good work. Then time can be on your side if you can clean out the wound and allow it to heal in the way it's supposed to. So if you want to heal from your relational wounds, if you want to avoid becoming that bitter, angry person, if you want to keep all of your relational limbs, you need to choose forgiveness. Think about that. I read statistics about the Civil War that it was between 60,000 and 100,000 amputations. And the reason they did that is because they didn't know about the bacteria, so it was the cleanest thing for them to do was to lop the arm off and just sew it up, and that was actually better than leaving a bullet wound. Well, I started thinking about it when it comes to relationships, like if we continue down this road, like think about that, like some people, if you never choose forgiveness and you keep choosing bitterness, the only way to survive is to lop the relationship off. It's like the same solution. We're just like those Civil War doctors. I don't know what else to do. Cut. And what if that's what it is? What if really your only options when it comes to relationships in your life are to forgive and to heal properly, or to get bitter and eventually not have that relationship anymore? Because eventually it just can't survive with it. So I think if you want to have relationships with other humans, you got to get really good at forgiving. This is the thing. Of all the skills and talents that you have, you need to really work on getting good at forgiving people. So let's talk about forgiveness for a minute. We're going to do what it is, what it isn't, your fear, and your motivation. I'm going to do 4 things today. So first, what is forgiveness? What is forgiveness? I had a mentor years ago tell me this, and he's told me it. The good mentors just tell you the same thing over and over again. Even though you can recite it back to them, they're not talking to here, they're talking to here. So he's said this to me so many times in my life, and I needed it. He said, Adam, forgiveness is a decision that leads through a process to a state. And I've probably told you this many times too. I'm doing the same thing my mentor did to me. I'm trying to tell you over and over again because you're not getting it. It's a decision first. It's a decision first. It's an act of your will. You choose to forgive. You choose to cancel the debt. You choose to release the offense. You choose to let go, to unclench your fist, to purge the grudge that's starting to form. You know how when somebody does something to you, you might not articulate this inside of your own head very well, but like you feel like they owe you something. Isn't that weird? Like when somebody does something, somebody hurts you, somebody says something to you, you feel like they owe you something, right? It almost feels like a debt. And we use that language, right? You'll say something like, you owe me an apology. We say that, right? We deserve something back from them, like they took something, they stole something, and we want them to give it back. They owe us something. Well, forgiveness is releasing that. Forgiveness is saying, nope, I let that go. I'm not holding that anymore. Because it's heavy. It's heavy to hold that, isn't it? If you can testify to this, if you've ever been bitter before, if you've ever had somebody that you're mad at, and they did a thing and they said a thing and they never apologized, you're just holding it, and it's heavy. It's like a stone in your soul. And you don't want to let it go. But the definition of forgiveness is you choose to let it go. You choose to release it. Now, the moment you make the decision, you enter into the process. And the process is the emotional process. Is now you have to go on the roller coaster ride of, I forgave you last night and I woke up this morning and I was mad again. So I had to forgive you again. And then when I went to bed the next night, I woke up the next morning, I was mad again. And you just keep going on this cycle of I'm choosing to forgive, but my feelings are still hurt. And you ride that roller coaster of emotion through the process till one morning you wake up and you're not mad anymore. It doesn't hurt anymore. You can think about that person and not have an emotional reaction. And that is the state of forgiveness. So it starts with a choice, which leads through a process. And this process can be it's kind of dictated by the size of the thing that they did to you, right? If the bigger the thing, the longer the process. And then eventually, hopefully, you'll get to the state, although I do believe some things are big enough that you may be in process for the rest of your life. You have to keep choosing and keep choosing and keep choosing. So that's what forgiveness is. Here's what it isn't, and I hope you're not, because you got to listen to all of these. It's really important. Forgiveness is not saying it was okay. When you forgive, you're not saying it was okay. We actually have a joke in our house. We try not to say when somebody says, will you forgive me? We try not to say it's okay. Like, we don't say that. I actually have a horrible thing I say when somebody says I'm sorry. I always say, you should be. This is pastor aggressive. That's what I'm doing always. But you're not saying it was okay because it wasn't. It wasn't okay. And forgiveness is not justifying or approving their actions. That's not what forgiveness is. You're not saying, oh yeah, it's cool, you stabbed me, that's fine. Like, I get it. I totally see your perspective on it. You're not saying that. Forgiveness is not forgetting. That's a crazy one. Forgive and forget. How? You guys have the ability to forget. I mean, I definitely can forget stuff. I just always forget the stuff I don't want to forget. And I remember the stuff I would like to. I don't have a choice. I don't think our brains are wired in such a way that you could just get rid of memories. Man, if you could do that, therapy wouldn't even be necessary, right? You just delete, I'm better. That'd be awesome. I can't. There's no such thing. You can't choose to forget something. And that's not what forgiveness is. And here's a big one. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. Those are two separate things. And I think this is one of the biggest pushbacks I get with people when you talk about forgiveness, is people will I'm not ready for that. But usually it's because we've mixed these two things together. So forgiveness is really mostly between you and God. You're going to release this person. You're going to let the thing go. They don't have to be present for that. They don't have to have apologized for that. They don't even have to think that they did anything wrong for you to forgive them. Do you realize that? It is a one-way street. You choose it with or without them. They are not necessary. You can forgive between you and God. God, I know I forgive them. I release that. It's a one-way street. Now, reconciliation, in order for you to have a relationship with a person, that is a two-way street. I imagine like a ravine that's formed between two people. Reconciliation is a bridge that needs built from both sides. You both need to be present in that. So when you forgive somebody, it doesn't mean that your relationship just automatically goes back to the way it was. The bigger the thing, the less likely that is true. It could redefine the whole relationship. But you still will, for your part, release it. You're going to let it go. Now, you can still keep them at arm's length because you're like, hey, you stabbed me, I forgive you. Here, stab me again. Like, you don't have to do that. That's not the way forgiveness works. You can forgive and keep them at a distance. You can forgive and still have to work through things. You can forgive and still have your feelings hurt. You can forgive and make really tough decisions. All that's true. So don't withhold forgiveness because you're not ready for a relationship yet. That's bad for your soul. That's bad for your soul. You can forgive and still say, all right, the process of reconciliation is going to be a long one. Both of those things can be true. So don't withhold forgiveness because you're afraid of relationship. You ever have people do that thing? I always hate anybody who does like that. Well, actually, kind of a thing. My kids do it to me all the time. It's my least favorite thing. Like if you say, it's 6 o'clock, and they're like, actually, it's 6:03. Shut up. I hate it more when people do it like about theological things, but there is one thing that I'm always tempted to when somebody says, oh, I'm just not ready to forgive yet. I was gonna be like, I think what you mean is you're not ready for a relationship, but if you're a Christian, you're always gonna be ready to forgive because you can make that choice by yourself. Like I wanna have some nuance here. I wanna separate these two things out. Reconciliation and forgiveness, not the same thing. Don't attach them because yes, I know it would be daunting for you to say, okay, I guess everything's back to the way it was. No, it isn't. Still gonna forgive you, but I'm gonna keep you here, okay? So, forgiveness, that piece, that's not optional. Now we're commanded to forgive. And I think that's the part where people are like, how could God? Again, if forgiveness is a one-way street, you can choose it. You can choose it. Reconciliation, that's optional. That's gonna take some work. Now, that's what it is and what it isn't. Let's get to your fear. You have a fear. I have a fear when it comes to forgiveness. See, when I say let it go, when I say cancel the debt, immediately I think, wait a minute. Are you saying that they just get away with it then? Like that's immediately what happens in my mind. What? They're off, scot-free. I just say it's fine and like it's over. Like that's the thing that happens in my soul. And what I imagine is like the scales of justice are now tipped, and I'm just supposed to leave him that way? Because something in me, and I imagine something in you, we want these things to get evened out. This is part of the you owe me an apology. Part of that is the making of this thing right. So we don't like it when a relationship feels like this. So is that what this is? Like that's the fear, right? That we're just going to release this thing to the air and nothing? Well, that's not the case. Look at Romans 12, starting verse 19 with me. Dear friends, he's like putting his arm around you because it's going to be hard. Never take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God. For the scriptures say, I will take revenge. I will pay them back, says the Lord. Instead, if your enemy's hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals of shame on their heads. Don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. So your mindset, and this is unique to Christianity, your mindset when you forgive is not that you're releasing it into the air. Your mindset as a Christian, when you forgive, is you're releasing it to God. You're taking this offense, this hurt, and you're giving it to God. You're taking your pain and your tears, and you're laying it at the foot of the throne of God, and you're letting Him be the one to tip these scales back to even. You're giving it to Him. He said He's in charge of that. He's the God of justice. He's the one who can do this. And part of the reason we got to let God do it, and I'm not trying to, I don't know you, but like I'm just saying, like, you're not good at even the scales. You're not good at this. Your problem is when you try to even the scales, when you try to make something right, by getting somebody back, or I'm going to say the thing, is you do this. You take it a little too far, and all of a sudden the scales are tipped this way. And then now they feel like they have a right to do something, and then they tip it too far. And some marriage relationships, some long-term relationships, it's all it is. It's two people trying to even these scales out themselves, and they're just constantly going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So this says, break the cycle, release it, give it to God. Let Him be the one who puts this back. And the way it describes this then, What a crazy thing for us as Christians. You can release it to God. And then the moment you release it to God and say, God, you've got this, now you are free to operate on a whole new level. When they're hungry, you can give them something to eat. When they're thirsty, you can give them something to drink. You can treat them in a completely different way because you're trusting that God's got it. God's got it. You don't have to carry the burden of exacting justice. He's going to do it. So you can treat them, well, the way God treats you. So that fear, wait, is this injustice going to last forever? Nope. God's got it. So forgiveness is actually an act of faith. For you, you've got this pain, this hurt, this thing that's happened, and you're like, if I lay it down, the scales are never going to be tipped even. No, it's an act of faith. God, you're going to do it. You're in charge of that. You've got this. I'm giving it to you, and I'm trusting you to be the one to fix it. Faith. Forgiveness in faith. So forgiveness from the Christian perspective is a little different. It's grounded in justice and truth and faith. It's rooted in the idea that we serve a God who is loving and just. We trust him to that. So hopefully that eases your fear. The scales will not remain unbalanced forever. All right, here's your motivation. We got to jump back to Ephesians 4:32. Instead, be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. Your motivation, if you are a Christian, your motivation is that God has forgiven you of everything. You know, that's the definition of a Christian. If you don't know, a Christian is somebody who's forgiven. You know, there's no perfect people sitting here, nobody who's got their life together sitting here. Christians are people who recognize that they don't have it together and they need God's forgiveness. That's what a Christian is. We look at what Jesus did on the cross. He died on the cross in our place for our sins, and we trust in that. So we're forgiven. It's like what a Christian is. So it's absurd for you to be forgiven of everything and withhold forgiveness for someone else. Because you have to reflect a little bit, and I know this is like an uncomfortable thing, but you have to reflect a little bit on how much God has forgiven you. If he's forgiven you of everything, even that thing, that thing you did way back then, all the stuff you've done, all the stuff you said, every careless word, he's forgiven. Do you imagine? That's a lot of words. And not just that, he sees this too. All those thoughts. Yeah, those ones. He sees all that. He's forgiven all of it. Jesus took every bit of it onto the cross. And you stand before God now clean. You stand before God now pure. So for you, with all that debt forgiven, for you to turn around and go, yeah, but that person hurt me. Nope. It's absurd. It makes no sense. It's like nonsensical thing for you to be forgiven and not be a forgiver. Forgiven people forgive. It's impossible to accept that level of forgiveness and to withhold a tiny amount. So, what I'd like to do here for a minute is I want to give you a chance to just kind of think about this, to reflect, to pray a little bit. Some of you, when I say the word bitter, you immediately have a name pop into your mind. You're like, yep, I'm bitter at this person, I'm bitter at that person. But some of us, can we just be honest? Bitterness is kind of sneaky, and you might not even realize you have it. It just kind of gets into your heart sometimes. You hear a song on the radio, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm mad. Why are you mad? Oh, it's because that reminded me of that person. I didn't even realize I was mad at him. Or you hear a name. You're totally not even talking about the same person. You hear a name and you're like, ugh. You have a feeling. Isn't that weird? Stuff just kind of pops up, and what that shows you is there's something going on in here. Maybe there's some stuff you haven't released yet. There's an infection still kind of working its way through your soul. So David prayed this prayer in the Psalms, search me and know me, God. So he's asking God to sift through his heart, to show him some things about himself that maybe he doesn't even realize about himself. So I just want to give you a minute. Worship team's not going to start the song. I just want to kind of wait a moment and have you ask God, hey, is there any Is there any bitterness in here? Do I have anybody who I need to choose to forgive right now? Right now. Again, they don't have to be present. They don't have to ask for forgiveness. They don't even have to know you're doing it. Is there anybody that you've got that you just need to let go of something? Ask God for that. Again, because bitter you is not the best you. If you're carrying it around, you're living beneath what God has for you. So let's just take one moment right now, and I want you to pray and ask God, hey, God, show me something about my soul. Is there anybody I need to forgive right now? Lord, I know this is hard. I pray for the person who's still bleeding from their relational bullet hole that they have in them. Pray that you would help them right now. Hand that to you. Hand that pain to you. Hand that hurt to you. Hand that offense to you. Lay it at the foot of your throne right now in faith that you've got it. Lord, I pray for those long ones, those old wounds that haven't quite healed. I pray that they give them back to you right now again and again and again, to give it to you again, to forgive again, to be clean. Lord, I pray for those ones that we don't even know are there. Pray that you would bring them to our minds, Lord. I pray that every person would be able to leave here clean, leave here bitter free, a forgiven person, forgiving people. And I pray that it wouldn't be just like a one-time thing, Lord, that we would keep choosing it, that we would be able to maintain that. So hard, Lord. And help us keep making that choice. Help us to feel the weight of the forgiveness you've given us. Fill us up so much with that forgiveness that it can't help but spill out of us onto everybody else around us. Help us to be forgivers in light of that. And help it to change everything. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.